Hello everybody, my name is Jeremy and you're watching the Morgue, where the t-shirts are more clever than the host. Wait, what? While we're talking about t-shirts though, I do want to bring up a quick topic here. We at Jupiter Broadcasting have affiliate links. For those of you that might not know what these are, it's basically the ability for you guys to get your geek swag on through various different vendors on the internet. A few that come to mind are like ThinkGeek and Amazon, etc., where if you follow the links that we'll include in our show notes, you can actually have your purchase support the show that you'll enjoy watching, and I really hope that you enjoy watching. Anyway, but these purchases through our affiliate links cost you absolutely nothing extra. It's actually those guys that end up sending us pennies off of any purchase made through that. So if you would like some of our fancy t-shirts, I'm going to start including an actual link to the actual t-shirt worn in the actual episode. So you can purchase it right then and there by following our show notes. It'll be epic. Okay, so pitch guy aside, let's get into the meat of today's episode. Actually, I've got a few things to say before we get into the meat of today's episode, which is going to be all about the hubbub surrounding the recent launch of CCP's expansion to their successful space simulator MMO, EVE. That's right, they recently launched EVE Incarna, and as most of you know that have been following the MMO industry in general, which you probably are if you're watching my show, you know that things went down. I'm going to bring on a correspondent this week to talk to me all about it because I myself am not an EVE player, so hopefully we get all the opinions in place and most of our facts straight. I should cover that right up front here, is that remember that this show is all an editorial. So when we go on and on about certain things in the industry, you got to keep in mind that we're not always talking about the way things are. Sometimes we're just talking about the way we see them, frequently in fact. But that being said, if you guys out there have a different opinion than anything that's stated on the show, I want to hear about it. If you leave a message wherever you're watching this, leave a comment below or head over to jupitercolony.com and join a thread about anything that we're talking about here. That is absolutely encouraged. I might not always have the chance to respond to everything that's said, but I love talking about video games and I love reading about what other people say about them. So make your voice heard. Get on over there and leave me a note, or if you must, send them on over to MMOrgue at jupiterbroadcasting.com. That's my email. I do read that, I promise. So, two quick pieces of business before we get into talking about EVE. First and foremost is that in my last episode, I did mention doing a bit of a review of the relaunch of Hellgate. Because of the length of the interview that's going to be going down on EVE, that's going to be our entire episode. I'm going to put off the review of Hellgate until next week. I do have thoughts on it. I would encourage you to check that out if you're interested in Hellgate at all. And if you want to get your thoughts known before I actually record the review, again, head over to jupitercolony.com. I'd love to hear about them. The other quick piece of business is just a bit of general editorial that I'd like to talk about. A few different stories have been coming out recently regarding Rift, more specifically regarding the cost of playing Rift. Many of you out there that are hardcore gamers probably noticed that Steam had a mind-boggling series of sales over the last few weeks here at the beginning of summer. There's summer camp sale. Well, on one of those days, two of those days actually, if I remember correctly, Rift went on sale for under $10, meaning that you could actually purchase this game and get in there with your free 30 days of game trial time for less than the cost of a movie ticket. It was great. Okay, that on its own is really nothing to be that excited about because it was a temporary sale. It's no longer going on. But the box cost of Rift is down to $40, just in general. Now, as it stands in the gaming industry, it's a pretty standard practice to drop the cost of your box after a few months on the market. That's no big deal. It's going to happen. So the fact that Rift has gone down in price and is occasionally subjected to sale prices that are even lower, not a big deal on its own. But it's not on its own, and that's why I'm bringing this up. In addition to the box cost being lowered, Rift has recently announced that subscribers can buy into package bulk rate subscriptions, 3, 6, and 12-month subscriptions, each of which give you pretty significant discounts on actually subscribing to the game. Now, up until this point, these have not been offered, which in retrospect was a little odd, considering that almost every other subscription-based MMO on the market does offer these bulk rates. So, for dedicated players of Rift, this is great news. For not so dedicated players of Rift, I'll come back to that in just a second, because the next bit of news that was brought to my attention is that Tryon Worlds just recently announced that there will be a comeback weekend for Rift, where everybody that owns a client of Rift will be getting a free weekend of play. your subscriptions will be automatically reactivated, and it's free to play for the weekend. Now, again, each of these individual stories taken on their own is not really all that much to talk about. But when you look at the trend of these three facts being back-to-back in different ways to lower the cost, the financial barrier of entry of playing Rift, it paints a picture to me of a developer that is either scared that they are starting to lose subscriptions or that they will soon be starting to lose subscriptions. Every one of these reductions in the cost of the barrier for entry to get in and play Rift feels like a grab for new subscriptions. And the fact that you can now purchase bundle subscriptions of several months at a time is also kind of a backhanded thing. I mean, yes, like I said, it's a great thing for long-term dedicated players of Rift. Absolutely. Go out there and buy your bundles because you will get your money's worth. But let's say a player out there is kind of on the fence about it and they might be playing for 6 months, so they decide to buy it. And then they quit 2 months later. The developer already has your 6-month bundle cost. They're not going to be refunding that. Ultimately, this is not a losing situation for the developer. It's not really a losing situation for the gamer itself either, but it's something you have to take into consideration if you're considering paying for these bundle subscription offers. And as I was saying, this is new to Rift. It seems like a grab to get more long-term money into the developer. I could just be reading too much into it, but I felt like it was something that needed to be brought up. And that's about all I have for the opening segment of this week's Morgue. Let's get into talking about Eve Incarna. Now, everyone that follows the MMO industry out there has probably caught wind, at least partially, of the big blow-up, the PR disaster that has recently come the way of CCP, creators and developers of EVE Online. And all of this disaster, which it's pretty accurate to call it that, has focused around their recent launch of the expansion Incarna. Now, to join me in the show, since I myself am not an EVE player, I've brought on a correspondent by the name of John. John, welcome to the show. Now, you
hello.
are basically, I've known you for a while here. We played some other games together. I won't call you out on which ones. But you've also been an EVE player and intrinsically involved with the community's reaction and backlash. You have, because you're a longtime EVE player, an understanding of just what exactly went down. I would love to have covered this without you because I don't feel like I need you, but you're here anyway. So, John, tell me a little. Okay, when I first heard about Incarna, I was actually pretty darn excited about this because I had played the EVE trial before, and one of the things that struck me right off the bat was the fact that you couldn't be a person in EVE. Now, you were always your ship. You had this little avatar thing that you customized, but it just kind of was this little picture up in the corner that never really did anything.
Right.
When I heard about Incarna, the big thing was that you're going to be able to walk around on stations, customize your avatar, and be a person at long last. So all of these stories that have come out about Incarna, I'm not hearing many people talk about that. Was it a letdown?
Well, first off, I have to say thank you for not calling me out on the other games that have ruined my EVE cred. Just saying that out, first. But and I too was excited about Incarna when I first heard about it 3 years ago.
It's been that long, really?
EVE Fest 3. I do not play well. Reading your chat. They had announced walking in station. They had shown pictures, and there was a few joke pictures of if anyone knows anything about the EVE interface, it's all basically right-click and another panel shows up. So they were showing someone walking to the station by right-clicking and click to move left foot, right click, move to right, or move right foot. That was the joke because we're all just stupid interfaces. Right. But no, what it did is actually, and I gotta say, it is impressive. They gave us new avatars. The previous avatars were from 2003.
Right, from the original game's launch.
No. The good thing about it is it looks really nice, as everything in EVE usually generally does. Looks really, really gorgeous.
Now, I've seen some of the videos of the new character customization come out 3 or 4 months ago. Was the first time that I had seen some of these. Is that what made it into the game? I haven't gotten to tinker with it since Incarna, but is it actually that impressive?
Yeah, no, actually, what you saw in the video is essentially exactly what we have now. It's maybe a little bit more polished in the sense that some of the options might have been moved around, but for the vast majority, it's exactly what you saw in those videos, and the customization is truly impressive, where you can see, change change definition, the length of individual arm parts. So you can just do the bicep, or you can do, like various things. You can really get into the nitty gritty of it.
That's all body customization, though. How's the actual clothing? That seems to be one of the sticking points in this. Go ahead and get us into that, because I think there are some good things about Incarna, though. That's kind of what I was trying to get at up here up front. John and I are probably going to end up dwelling a bit on this whole drama and the controversy that's come out around, primarily the cash shop. We'll explain that in a little more detail. But, if you're a new player out there and interested in getting into EVE, Incarna has added a few more things. Specifically, John, you and I were talking before the show about the fact that this finally makes you feel like a person. This expansion does, because of the customization of your avatar, right?
Well, Well, the original joke was that the picture we put up front is kind of like the MySpace picture with the camera that makes you look the best, and in reality, inside that little pod, you're just a piece of goo. Right. This originally was kind of the idea. Yeah, now, for a new player to come into the game, they will have an avatar, which is what everyone's used to. Every game before had a real avatar. You always customize a character, depending on the game to a greater extent. Mm-hmm. But now, what they do is you create your avatar, and then you actually are inside the station. You can walk around. You can see your ship. You can walk up from your room, up a ramp, and then look out into the glory that is your ship. Unfortunately, starting ship.
Well, that must also give you a better sense of scale of what you're actually dealing with in the rest of the game as well.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, considering most people fly frigate when you start out. Well, I mean, you have to, and it's a puny little thing compared to some of the vessels in this game. But when you walk up to it, you finally realize, a frigate is actually a big ship in its own right.
Right.
So it gives you a good sense of scale. And they redid the introduction, so before, when you play the game, I felt it was a little bit bewildering for new players, is that you start right outside. You're not your character like before. You were we didn't have an avatar. You just had your picture, and you start in your ship, and the ship starts talking to you, telling you to shoot this and mine that. And right. I kid you not, it literally said, "Mine this," and you sat there and mined it.
Press this button to do the next thing.
Which was riveting. Yeah. And then there was this one
everything about EVE is riveting.
Yeah. Yes, actually. That's true.
Actually, before we get into the rest of the drama that has unfolded recently, is it accurate from an EVE player standpoint? You hear it all over the internet that it's actually the quote that I use now, and I think I got this from you when we were playing another game together, was that it's the prettiest spreadsheet you'll ever play, and that some of the best stuff that happens in EVE happens on the forums or happens offline, happens in the chat rooms, stuff like that. I would say you're correct. I would say the only game I can think of that has actually made it into the news, other than EVE Online, which has made it multiple times, is World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft hasn't made it in because of the players per se, more like the addiction. And I would also like to point out that Second Life gets in the news quite a bit as well. Thank you to the chat room for bringing that up.
Yeah, but not to the same extent.
But right, and to draw that comparison even further, WoW is talking about having a game with such a big social impact outside of the game, because 10 million or more players play it now, and probably 30, 40 have played it over the years since it's actually launched. EVE has relatively a much smaller subscription base. I wouldn't have a number off the top of my head, but I'd say
I do.
It's under 1 million, right?
Oh, well under. Last I heard, and this was many months ago, was around 350 to 400
active subscribers. Or
active subscribers. Players. Active subscribers.
Okay, so, but again, to draw that corollary, when you're talking about a game that gets into the news that's got 10 million players, there's a certain acceptability. It's a juggernaut. It's worth talking about. When you've got a game with only 300 and something thousand players that still makes it into the news, it says something special about the environment and the mechanics of that game, that it's newsworthy, that they've created something that can get this many people talking about it, even though not as many people play it.
Right. In many comments, I would go to Rock, Paper, Shotgun and various other sites, and the comments are always, I love hearing news about EVE, and it just reinforces my opinion never to play it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've had multiple bank scandals. We've had the first IPO where an alliance decided to attempt to build space stations everywhere and make them free trade havens, and there was an IPO, initial public offering of stock.
Right.
in the company or
the There was a story about like an 850 billion credit scam.
That was Eve Bank. That was the Bank of Eve, which was a player-created thing, had nothing to do with CCP. But people gave their money over to some other player with no assurances, and once again, it turned out to be a scam.
That's a part of what a lot of developers call emergent gameplay, and it's something that's been very big in EVE. I mean, the CCP devs, correct me if I'm wrong, you're more in tune with this, but it seems like CCP makes the game in such a way that they encourage, if not force, this type of sandbox emergent gameplay where something that they put into the game is used by players in a way that is not the documented intended purpose. But
my God, yeah.
That's a pretty accurate assessment, don't you think?
To say the least.
They almost purposefully leave these loopholes, you might call them, to allow players to experience the game in a way that they want to experience it.
For the most part, they really give you a sandbox.
It's important for us to kind of to bring that statement to the front, because as we go through the rest of the complaints of the actual PR meltdown and all the complaints about Incarna, I think one of the biggest reasons that this has become such an issue is because CCP has managed to interfere with that emergent gameplay and with the economy that they have allowed to take root in EVE through the actions that they took in this particular expansion's launch. Why don't we go ahead and get into that just a little bit here?
Sure.
If you could do you have like maybe a sentence or two summation of what the initial issue was? When Incarna landed, why did people complain?
The initial, so none of what came in Incarna was a surprise. They fully said that there would be a in-game vanity market, which would be, a cash shop, essentially. You converted Plex cards to get this new currency, Aurums, which the interstellar credit is the actual currency of the game. These Aurums are just for this particular cash shop, and you get vanity items.
Let's cover some of this terminology up front in case you guys don't know EVE. A Plex is a player license extension, which is basically 30 days of game time. They can be bought in sets of 2, right, as a 60-day, and then you convert them over to 2 separate 30 days in game.
Correct.
Okay, so that's how real-life money gets transferred into the EVE universe, because then another player will pay ISK, which is the in-game currency, to buy that Plex off of the player that spent real-life money for it. Now, with Incarna, they introduced this new currency. Correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, John. Hop in anytime.
You're so far so good.
So you're able to transfer a Plex card, that player license extension, into a certain amount of Aurum, this new currency, which is used on their cash shop.
Correct.
Okay, so now we've got all that covered up front. So I didn't mean to interrupt too much. I just want to make sure people understand.
No, it's a good point to make. And in these Plex cards are traded in for a set amount, which at the time was 3,000 Aurums, and you were able to purchase vanity items. Now, the issue came out because, like I said, none of this is a surprise. Everyone knew that, and they were mostly everyone I saw. You had the few people. Well, I pay subscription, so why the hell do I have to pay more for items? And you're always going to have that issue. Many other games have that problem. The issue came in was when we saw the price.
The actual prices of the objects on the store.
When you converted them to real cash value, you had a monocle, purely vanity, for $71.
Yeah, that's pretty damn pricey for just something that shows up on your character avatar in game. And just to make it even add more insult to that injury, walking around on stations did not end up being the feature that everybody thought it was going to be.
That was the next issue. Yes, when they said you will be able to walk in station, we're all like, yes, we want to walk through. Well, not everyone, but we would like to spin our ships differently and walk through stations. And when it came to release time, there was one room. And I don't mean that facetiously as in really, literally one room. There was your captain's quarter, which was, you can't change it
for every captain. And so does that mean that there's not even like big social hubs where you can go and interact with other people's avatars?
No, there's not even that. There is actually a very taunting button. There's 2 exits technically. One that you can walk towards your ship, and the second one that's inside the room. there's a little button that says station, to station, and when you click on it, it says, warning, station atmosphere not yet decontaminated for castlear consumption, and you can't go there.
So in other words, this is a very incomplete feature. I mean, EVE players were promised something that is not there.
Right.
Fundamentally just not there.
Right. We were promised walking in station, which, to the credit, we did. I can walk in a room.
Well, but I mean, that leads to the obvious question: why pay real life money to customize your avatar? Why buy a monocle when nobody's ever going to see it except you?
Well. Hey, okay. So one in the dev blog, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually, they did mention that monocle is the only item that will truly show prominently on your avatar picture and on the forums.
That's true, because it's just a picture of your head.
Which is very funny, because once you bought that monocle and equipped it, it actually made your avatar disappear on the forums.
Insult to injury again.
$71 to have things disappear. Now, and I understand awesome. It is their first iteration of it, but CCP is also notorious for creating something, saying it's the first iteration, and then working on another thing.
Kind of leaving the rest of it unfinished and left.
Right. Starbase took forever for their second iteration, and they're still not quite improved. Sovereignty just went under a change not too long ago last year. Their iteration is just kind of suspect.
So would it be accurate to say that on top of the outcry against the prices and the fact that the stations are not complete, there's also the fear that these features will never be fleshed out, or at the very least that the development cycle will be so long that people that were clamoring for Incarna's massive features of being a person and being customizable and everything, that they might not even see them while they're still interested in the game?
I would more so say that you might not get what you want in the end anyways. Like, the fear isn't that we'll get it. I believe that eventually CCP will get it, mainly because they have a financial stake in getting it all done. Because, as they have said previously, this is their tech demo for their next MMO, World of Darkness, the vampire.
World of Darkness, right.
That is their next one, and they admit it. And in all honesty, I don't have necessarily a problem with that actually being in the first iteration of it. The problem is how they forced it on people. When it first came out, they forced walking in station. It wasn't an option. Like, before you go into station, you just spawn your ship around in circles. It was great. And the issue is that we ended up finding out that it was hurting computers. Like, it was not fully fleshed out. There were many bugs. And certain people had computers crash and die because of walking in station.
Nice. Well,
yeah, and you can't turn it off. Right. Well, I think we're on emergency patch 6
since the launch of Incarna.
5 or 6. It's one of those. And and to fix these various issues, now they have allowed for the disabling of it now, because of all these issues where you can press escape, you can go to your display, and you can shut off the station, and it just kind of goes blurry.
So just to clarify, you have the option to turn off one of the primary features of their expansion pack. Am I understanding that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Which they did not want to do initially, but because of these issues hurting people's computers, they had to do this. There was no option. Like, they had to allow people to disable walking in station because it was literally hurting people.
All right. I don't want to dwell too much on this specifically. No. I do want to get into a little more of the actual newsworthy stuff that started to spill out of this, but I think it's clear to say at this point that that this expansion launched either prematurely or unfinished, if not both, right? I mean, this is not what people were expecting. They got a little bit of a bait and switch. So to start with, just right off the bat, players that were excited about this new expansion didn't get what they were expecting. They got shafted to a certain degree. Somebody in the chat room said that through this cash shop, you were paying $71 to get kicked in the groin. I mean, that's not an entirely inaccurate statement.
The main issue became actually a dev blog. They, in response to a lot of the criticism, a dev blog came out to... Okay, well, here, if you wouldn't mind, I can read it. It's very short, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pricing structure. People have been shocked by the price range in the NEX store, which is the cash shop.
Yeah.
But you should remember that we were talking about clothes. Look at the clothes you are currently wearing in real life. Do you have any specific brands? Do you choose it because it was better quality than a no-name brand? Assume for a short while you are wearing a pair of $1,000 jeans from some exclusive Japanese boutique shop. Why would you want to wear a pair of $1,000 jeans when you can get a perfectly similar jeans for under $50? And then they go on to say it's a status item and that these prices are okay.
They really think that gamers are interested in $1,000 pair of jeans?
Well,
I can kind of understand the similarity of calling it a status symbol, but the fact of the matter is that the economic difference is worlds away. It's like comparing a sword with a needle. You're not in the same ballpark. You're talking about people that are interested in playing. A large portion of EVE players play for free. They bought the initial game and then they pay with in-game credits for their monthly subscription.
Yep.
Those players, and that's a good portion of EVE players, are still interested in this game because it gives them a good gaming experience for no cost. And now you're trying to shove $1,000 jeans down their pants through a dev blog.
Yeah, it probably wasn't the best examples I've ever seen, and it did further inflame because then certain items, people were wondering, well, what else are you going to put in this cash shop? And that's where Fearless came out.
First of all, before we get into this, it was bad enough that it's titled "Greed is Good," which is actually a movie quote. It's a reference to something in pop culture, but it's aside from that because the message there is exactly what that title said. There were statements contained within this Fearless newsletter. I've got a link in the show notes, actually, to several of these ignominious quotes from CCP devs talking about the cash shop, the kind of things that they could put on it, the kind of things that they could get people to pay for. And this is where the S really hit the fan. People went nuts.
Well, people's Fearless, funny enough, fear was introduced by Fearless because the way the game is set up is it's a true sandbox. Everything in the game is produced, minus the Plex cards, which are bought. I mean, that's completely different. But everything in the game, every ship, every item I use, my ammo, my guns, the engine, everything in that is made by someone. And the fear was that someone could then, with this shop, if they added it, could just go in and they could buy, skills maybe, which take time, real time, that many people have spent, like myself, subscription, many, $15 a month.
Well, one of the terms that I keep hearing brought up on the stories that mention this is the term gold ammo, which is actually not specifically ammunition, but it's the idea that by buying items through this cash shop, you would be able to buy enough of an advantage that your shots would be, that your combat capabilities would be vastly superior to somebody that spent no money. It's a terminology that we brought up on the show in the past called pay to win. Yeah.
Yes.
They're just using a different term in these stories, gold ammo. So if
it fits
that, yeah, it does.
The gold ammo, the idea is that, okay, I have ammo that does this much damage. Well, if I went to the cash shop, I could get ammo that gets this much damage, way more, and thus being able to, it wipes out completely my effort because they just get better items, or various other things, in which would truly...
Let me play devil's advocate here just for a minute, because I am an EVE outsider, so maybe I'm not entirely understanding the situation here. But the option already exists within the game to take real-life currency and transfer it into items in-game. Now, admittedly, that takes several middlemen in that process. You have to buy the game time codes, transfer them into Plexes, and find a buyer for them. And then use that ISK that they purchase the Plex with to purchase these items or the services of somebody to get you the items. So there's several middlemen along that road, but ultimately the beginning and the end are the same. You're using real-life money to buy an item. Now, from, again, an outsider's perspective, it doesn't seem that different to be able to bypass the middlemen and buy directly from CCP. But that's kind of the crux of the issue, isn't it?
Well, the main issue there is that with your example, you have one person, a player, who has some extra cash, so they want more in-game money. So they take their real money, they buy a Plex card, and they sell it to someone in-game for in-game money. Now, yes, they can go buy a ship, but that ship came from another player. Someone produced it. Someone mined it. Someone researched the blueprint, someone put that into production, and then shipped it to probably a trade hub, and then put it up on the market. And that is the economy still. The ISK exchange there already existed. Now, if you were to buy a ship directly from a cash shop, it bypasses everyone in the game, not just like cutting out the middlemen of just a few. This cuts out the whole game.
The whole economy, really, because that's what it comes down to, is building and purchasing things. Right.
Not only the building, but the point of flying around and capturing these precious materials that you can only get from moons, like these things that move whole alliances. These alliances are made up of thousands and thousands of accounts. Moonswarm Federation is currently sitting at 7,037 accounts as a part of that alliance.
Wow. That's a huge amount of time. And this is something that I think I'd like to go ahead and discuss a little bit right now. Is I have always been of the opinion that time, at one level or another, time is the ultimate currency of an MMO. At some level or another, the devs are always asking you to trade in your time for something, whether it's advancement of your character, enjoyment of a situation, a new toy, a new mount, anything. And so to put a dollar figure on your time, that's one thing. But when you get down to, I mean, you were talking about alliances that involve several thousand players and their accounts, and they're purely in there for the purpose of maintaining control of resources that are necessary to create items for other players to buy. That is their time investment. That's the bottom line of what they're paying their time for. If you, as the developer, allow another player to circumvent that time investment, you've just made that entire corporation, those multiple thousands of people's time, worthless.
Yeah, I told you before the show, I have a few friends that I'm still in contact with, and they do production mostly, and they were furious because they knew that after Fearless was released, leaked, they could read that, and they saw that they could be invalidated.
In response to this document being leaked out, several dev blogs were posted, several dev statements were made on their forums basically saying more or less that's not true. Now, again, I'm an outsider. I don't have an intrinsic knowledge of these stories, but it sounds like they were basically backtracking.
Well, the problem with... here's the issue. The reason why eventually what was CSM, I can't remember what that stands for, Council of Seller Management, which is made up of players elected from the player base to go to Iceland, where they're from, was that they never said on the forums, we will never sell you ships or special items on... I mean, they could have literally solved the whole issue, stopped the rioting, which actually did happen. There was real rioting.
Yep. There was some live streamed riots. I don't know if you had a chance to see any of those, but on Justin TV.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. I saw it, especially the aftermath. They could have just said, we will never add items into the game that were not pure vanity.
But instead, their statements kept dancing around that fact.
They said, we will never add gold ammo to the market, or to this cash shop, which does not say we won't add ships. We will not add... they never said that. And they still haven't said that. In fact, after all is said and done, they still really haven't said that.
So at this point, it continues to just fester, right?
Yes.
Until they come out and go back on the statements that were made in their document, their fearless greed is good. Do you think it's likely that they will give in to player demands at this point and go back on those statements?
Well, here's the issue. So as the timeline goes, let's start. So we had the cash shop.
Right.
We had the ridiculous prices and people going like, what in the world? So then you had $1,000 pair of jeans dev blog.
Right.
At that point in time, people were clamoring for them to literally state that they would never add anything other than pure vanity items to the shop, which they would never say. They would just say, we will never add gold ammo. At this point in time, things got further inflamed because I believe it's the owner of CCP, his email was leaked.
That's in addition to the Greed is Good document.
Yes, so the Greed is Good's out. And when people are freaking out because it's, like everyone's talking about, because now we should say in this Fearless document, which says Greed is Good, there is a counter claim that says, no, this is not good, but it's much shorter and less provocative. And of course, everyone's going to stay on the provocative article saying, we're adding everything to the market. Or
and
to
I would
the
like to
shop.
just state that I'm going to have a link where you can download and read this document for yourself in our show notes if you'd like to.
Yeah. So this little email come out by Hilmar, who is the owner, where it basically calls all of the EVE player bases whiny little kids.
Oh, man.
Right. He says, currently we are seeing very predictable feedback on what we are doing. Having the perspective of having done this for a decade, I can tell you that this is one of the moments where we look at what our players do and less at what they say, which eventually they find out, oh, shit, they're canceling the subscriptions.
They're doing what they're saying.
Yeah, because this is a fundamental, the essence of the game. So this email leaks out, further inflaming everything. I mean, this is where the riots start. Like
this is a perfect example of pretty much a perfect storm. Yeah.
Perfect storm. That's exactly what it was. You had Fearless leak out, which I have my theory on this one. Since it's an internal document, I have a feeling this is a disgruntled employee who saw that and actually was afraid of the for the company.
Well, and you even said that as part of the document there was kind of a devil's advocate portion in there that said greed is not good. That there were actual devs internally that were quoted as being against this, even as far back as before it was implemented.
Right, correct. And the whole thing is, again, the provocative statements going to win out. And the provocative one was very bad at timing. Yeah, it's it was again a perfect storm. It really was in every way. The email that leaked out as well. It really came up to riots, and people. There was a thread that was hundreds of pages long of people canceling multiple accounts.
Yeah. There have been estimates out there in the media that somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 players have confirmed the cancellation of their EVE account over this situation. And when you're talking about a game that I don't remember if we recorded it or not, but you told me that the current estimates are between 350 and 400,000 active subscriptions. When you're talking 5,000 to 10,000 have quit, that's a humongous percentage of the overall player base. Yeah. And even if half of them come back, that's still a very significant loss on behalf of CCP.
Right, and it was, and I think they saw that this was turning into something more than that they, because there have been many big issues of players versus CCP.
Well, and just to be clear, that's something that's going to happen in the MMO industry anytime. Right. Generally, you're going to see change is bad. Anytime a developer changes anything, there's going to be some outcry on some level. I think that's an important point to make about this whole thing, is that this is not just some disgruntled players voicing their opinions. This is some people with very good points. A lot of people with very good points showing CCP that the monster they've created is beyond their control, and they need to get in line with what is going on with their player base.
Yeah. Before, when those smaller changes come through, change is bad, it was usually the PvPers or the miners or the production, and it was small groups that got upset. Mm-hmm. Like it was different subsects of the EVE players. This one was a universal outcry.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not just an economic imbalance, but it's also a very real. Just like we've mentioned in other games, pay to win is gonna come back and bite your players in the ass at some point or another. And especially in EVE, where the players are so much more interested in gaming the system, where that is part of the gameplay experience. It's an intrinsic part of the way that you play EVE is by finding the loopholes and exploiting them. It's not just about following the rules, and I don't think it ever has been. And
generally, I mean, some of the most profitable ventures have been stealing. Yeah. And that's been completely acceptable in the game. Like they, scamming people, perfectly okay.
Yeah. Let me ask you, John, just as a straight out, just what is your opinion on this? Do you think that the people that are complaining, it sounds like you think that CCP has made a bad move here, correct?
I think they've overstepped themselves, and I'm still not happy with the response of we're not going to put gold ammo in, which, while that's good news, they're not going to put gold ammo in. The problem is what will they put in there? They're not excluding the option of skill points. Right. Things that you actually invest time in. The few things you can to, can you just get that? Like,
right.
they will not say that.
So I just have a few more questions for you. As an EVE player here, do you think, looking forward, you know my opinions on free-to-play. You know that personally I think that this is an area that I think the MMO industry as a whole is starting to shift towards. Maybe not completely and definitely not overnight, but it's going to become more and more prevalent as time goes by. Now,
Sure.
Free-to-play, supported by a cash shop, this could be something that EVE is looking forward to. Maybe they're planning to have the cash shop take over entirely. Just keeping that in mind, is this something that you think that 2-3 years from now, are we going to look back on this whole situation and just roll our eyes at ourselves? Or is this a permanent black mark on CCP that will never really be recovered from?
For EVE Online, this is a permanent black mark because the game from inception was designed around the player. And the problem is they're trying to force certain things onto the player, like these cash shops that are quite alien. Now, if a game's built around that, like you say, free-to-play games, where you can get multiple items, experience, let's say Lord of the Rings, where you get experience potions, various things, like that, if built for it, makes sense. And there is a good argument out there that this was all designed for World of Darkness. This cash shop,
as
this
kind
whole
of just
idea.
Like you guys as EVE players are their live testing environment. Which
is also part of the controversy, is people are upset that we are the guinea pig.
It's insulting. I mean, it's one thing to have a test server where you tell people it's a test server and ask them to check out your game and look for bugs and stuff like that, but it's another to use a live game as a proving ground for future technology. That's a little underhanded, a little insulting, disrespectful to your current players.
Well, the problem is, and the big problem is, they force it. They're, like I said, walking stations forced. Now, the main issue is, okay, if you force it, why do I want to do it? They didn't actually make an incentive for you to want to do it.
Right.
Okay, shiny new, we can walk around station, that's kind of nice. But there's no actual benefit. I mean, previous expansions have added various things, and there were incentives to do these things that they're adding.
To experience the new features and the new mechanics.
Right. Unfortunately, right now, there's no incentive. It's just, this is what it is.
Do you think, in your opinion, is it just that they need to come out and say what they're going to be putting on the cash shop? Is that how they need to defuse the situation at this point? Or
So, I mean, I guess to wrap the story up, once the perfect storm has basically hit and destroyed a lot, they flew out the council. It was very interesting. They then released the dev blog. After that video, they had a joint statement. Then they also had it was actually a very scathing rebuke of CCP. So what they did is they had the statement on behalf of CCP, and they talked about what they were planning, what they showed the CSM, and they said the Noble Exchange or the NEX store will only be used for sale of vanity items only. That's what they say so far. But they also said only that they would never sell gold ammo. So at the same time they say vanity, does that mean they'll open up a second shop that have the ships? There's a lot of question about that.
Here's a quote. We've expressed our deep concern, this is from CSM, about potential gray area that the induction of virtual goods permits, and the CCP has made a commitment to discuss any proposals that might fall into those gray areas in detail with CSM. But that means that, again, they're not ready to make any statements right now. They're prepared to discuss them as they come up. That is the kind of gray area that already exists that's concerning so many EVE players. All right, so I don't want to... I think we've gone over the situation pretty thoroughly here. Anybody that's been following this loosely, I think you should have a better understanding now. And unfortunately, it looks like the major kind of lesson that could be learned here that for future developers is don't misunderestimate. Don't underestimate your player base. I mean, don't think that your players are dumb, because it's guaranteed that there's somebody out there playing your game that's smarter than you. And you always have to take that into consideration. You also need to really understand your player base and the reasons that they play your game. That's really what it all comes down to. I mean, the rest of this that kind of boiled over into the situation at hand included the newsletter leak and the email leak. Those kind of things can't be avoided. But if you're in touch with your community and you understand your game at the level that your players understand it, even those kind of leaks will not be as big of a deal. Now, I do before we move on to this one, I do want to make a disclaimer that we probably should have made up front. A lot of the concerns here that are the same concerns that John is voicing here are the same concerns that the community as a whole of EVE has. It's not so much as what is being said, it's what's not being said. And I realize that means a lot of speculation on behalf of the people that are being a little paranoid. Let's face it, we come across as paranoid when we're talking about this. I don't think anybody...
You know what, as you said, it's your investment of time. I started playing in 2006, August of the 19th of August.
Okay.
And so I've spent 5 years essentially playing this game.
Yeah.
And then to fundamentally change it.
Not just change it, but to potentially, and again, this is what's not being said, but some of the things that CCP has not said lead people to indicate that there will be an option in the near future to bypass your time investment for new players to buy things directly from CCP that would not involve the existing economy, the existing player base, like yourself. You would be bypassed and made invalid.
Yeah, I mean, many of my friends, when we talk about getting back into EVE or doing various items, we talk about different schemes to make money, and that a lot of this has to do with production or acquiring materials. And if they can bypass me,
then why are you there? A lot of the worry that's out there right now regarding this whole CCP EVE blow up is what's not being said. And I think that's another good dev takeaway, and for the MMO industry in general, is sometimes it's important what you don't say to your players, that is. Because even if this just comes down to a grammatical error, if they're just not saying things the right way, the point of the matter is that is what is causing people to freak out. Just like you've said numerous times, all they've said that they won't do is that they won't sell gold ammo. Well, maybe in their mind they're saying that means vanity items only, but to the rest of us, we hear nothing but gold ammo. So they could still be intending to launch an entirely second store that's like, so the NEX will be clothing only, and then there's going to be a ship store. That's still something that we haven't been told won't happen. Yeah, and that's what's going down. That's why people are freaking out.
It's changing the fundamental soul of what the game is. Or this it possibly could, I should say. This is not, obviously not set in stone, but this could change the soul of EVE. EVE is based around the players, and this would be forcing things onto the players, not like an emergent. So this should be clarified. One of the things in previous expansions is that these things added were not like, oh, well, this seems like a good idea, let's add it in. No, these were like, players were living out in 0-0 or the no security systems. And they were anchoring cans, they were making safe spots, and they were doing all these things to live out there. So they're like, oh, people are doing that. Let's add space stations that people can build there. They added...
They were adapting to the player base.
Right. I mean, there was a time where there was no sovereignty, and people claimed it still. There was actually solved maps that was just based on political considerations, if you will. And people fought over land that they couldn't actually conquer in-game. They added sovereignty. So
that there was an actual in-game mechanic for the player mechanics that were already in place.
For the emergent behavior, as you said. That's what previous is. This was not something, like I said, there was no incentive. This was not also wanted, this per se. I mean, everyone wants an avatar, and I think in the long run, this is better for their business model to have a new, a new player comes in, they get an avatar, they get a person they can walk around as.
Sure. And on the long run, the option of having a way for players to pay extra money to enjoy the game is always a good thing as well. I do honestly feel that CCP has handled this poorly, but on a very general scale, if your players want to pay you more money to play your game, it's in your best interest to allow them an option to do so.
Yeah. And that's why the vanity shop was okay. When plexes were added, that was considered no problem, because this allowed people who didn't have, everyone, any new MMO comes out, go look at the Old Republic, general forums, and you're going to see people going, is this game free to play? Because if it's not free to play, I'm not playing it.
Exactly. That's every game coming out on the market these days.
Well, in the past couple of years, easily, like, I don't have a credit card. There's no way I can do it.
Right.
And I think the Plex card was one of the greatest inventions or additions. I don't know if it's an invention because Asia has up and away ran with free to play and various other items, but the ability to do in-game actions to get in-game money to pay for your time to play, I think is well, it's kind of brilliant, really.
I agree. The whole Plex situation is great. If you just to wrap this up, because I think we have gone on quite long enough, but if you guys have any more discussion that you'd like to bring up, I would encourage you to head on over to Jupiter Colony. I'm sure that there are there's EVE players in our chat room right now that look like they would have more information on this, that would like to start a conversation. I'd love to see more of that going on over at Jupiter Colony. I'll try to twist John's arm into popping into that thread as well.
I still have an account, so I should be on there.
Just one more thing that I would like to get your opinion on, if you have one. Just after this whole thing blew up, EVE announced a new marketing strategy. There's a new marketing campaign where it's called EVE is Real. And it's basically, it's viral marketing, but it's encouraged viral marketing. What CCP is doing is incentivizing the players to market the game for them. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on this in general, because the type of incentive that's being given is Aurum, which is the new in-game currency being used for these vanity items on the NAX shop.
Well, one of my initial reactions is after reading the statement, it basically doesn't matter because everyone gets it. Like, as people, it seems like, at least from reading it, as it gets more, as they meet their marketing quotas or whatever it is, goals, everyone gets a bonus, which that's fine. It really doesn't affect me one way or another. And I kind of see where they're going with this, where you give them a little bit and they're like, well, for only a little bit more, I could buy that one vanity item.
That's true.
For me, I'm going to look at it and go, Like, personally,
this doesn't aggravate the issue at hand, though, you don't think?
I don't think this actually affects the issue at all, because, I mean, this, again, is just, it's just a way of getting the word out. They've already offered previously, before the cash shop, I was saying, is you send out a buddy invite, they get 21 days of free gameplay, and if they convert, you can get 30 days added directly to your account of playtime, or you can get a Plex card, which is 30 days as well, but you can sell that for money.
Right.
So to me, that really doesn't bother me. That there's always been an incentive to bring your friends in.
There's always been an encouraged viral marketing campaign going on.
This is just a new one using in the new shop. So that doesn't really bother me at all.
Okay. John, you have been a great fount of information here. I hope you guys have all enjoyed talking a little bit about the blow up over EVE. And you can bet if something big comes out on this, I will be at least picking your brain, if not having you back on the show. So thanks again.
Be happy to. No problem. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, talking about EVE is some heavy stuff, huh? But it's actually more fun to talk about than to play, in my opinion. Now, okay, on next week's episode, we will be covering Hellgate, but I don't know what else to cover as part of that episode. So if you have any suggestions, again, leave a comment wherever you're watching. I'll be watching the latest in the MMO news to bring it all to your faces next week. Before I let you go, I have my little tease of the week that I'd like to lay on your faces because you will be excited. I know a lot of you out there only started watching The Morgue because my very first episode talked about Star Wars: The Old Republic. Well, I have some good news for you. Count them, two separate rumors that are pointing at November as the official launch date of Star Wars: The Old Republic. The first of these is actually a leak from one of the voice actors that worked on the project itself. The quote that's contained in an interview with him in another publication, which a link is in the show notes if you would like to check up on my sources, is that his work on this project would be published by Christmas. The second of these comes from a source that I unfortunately cannot publish, but it's in regards to the Old Republic Razer peripherals. And the statement on this is that they will also be available by Christmas. And it stands to reason that something that's specifically marketed to a singular title would be out at the same time as the product itself. So, that looks like November, maybe December, but definitely by Christmas. I'm still just keeping my fingers crossed for a beta invite, though. Come on! But for now, the best that I can hope is that the Force is with me. All right, that's all we've got for this week's episode of The Morgue. Until next week, play safe, everyone. And remember, if at first you don't succeed, destroy all evidence that can prove that you tried in the first place. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the... No, wait. That's not how I introduced this show. That's a completely different show I was just about to do. I'm going to do the morgue instead. Hello, everybody. Why is that so hard to say? Really? It always comes out saying, like, hello, everybody.
Oh, hi, dog. Hang on. Is this the time I can introduce her?
Sure.
Oh, nice. Come on. Yay.
Ta-da. And I think we got everything. Maybe twice.